Professor Alladi, thank you so much for actually giving me a second interview. First time in my interviews, the repetitions happened really early on, but I'm glad that it's with you. The repetition is you. I want to talk to you about a little bit more about your experiences, your memories. So in the first half we talked about the Ramanujan journal, but we didn't get to touch Erdos, we didn't get to touch any of your relations with Gordon, we didn't touch anything about SASTRA or other schools that you actually add in their advisory reports. So maybe we can start talking about that in this 15 minutes.
Sure.
And with that, maybe we can just start with Erdos. So I believe you have Erdos number 1, and you're one of the few people nowadays that actually knew Erdos personally. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so I actually consider it as one of the most fortunate things that happened in my academic career and life, that I had this close interaction and collaboration with Paul Erdos, who, as we all know, is the most prolific mathematician ever, with more than 1,500 papers, but more so a great human being and someone who constantly was on the lookout to encourage young mathematicians and also bring in mathematicians into the research world. Okay, because people in the young age, they may want to do so many things. Yeah. And Erdos felt it as a life mission to attract them to mathematics. So it's actually a very interesting story as to how Erdos and I collaborated, and I will say this briefly. I won't elaborate it on too much because it's available actually on YouTube by somebody who took a video of my lecture.
Oh, really? Then maybe I can find it and just try to link that. Yeah.
Right. But I'll give you in a more brief form. So I was doing research on my own in elementary number theory, studying some arithmetical functions and their properties and so on, Fibonacci numbers. So one of the things that I was working on, and I found that this had not been discussed in the literature in any detail, was the sum of the prime factors of a number. You find a lot of papers on the sum of the divisors, going back to the Greeks' perfect number problem. The number of divisors, going back to the Dirichlet divisor problem. You have the number of prime factors due to Hardy and Ramanujan, nothing on the sum of the prime factors. So I said, why not discuss this function? It seemed to be very natural, some of the prime factors with multiplicity. I call this function A of n. Of course, I was kind of enthusiastic about this whole thing, and so I call it A of n. And I noticed two properties which motivated me to start working on this, that it's completely additive, like the logarithm, and two, the number of solutions of A of n equal to m is the number of partitions of m into primes.
If I'm not showing enough surprise, it's only because I took this course from you, that I actually learned these from you before.
Right. So because of these two properties, I started investigating, and I found lots and lots of interesting properties of this function A of n. So at that time, I was told, when I was in India, I should contact Paul Erdos, because he is not only the expert on this type of number theory, he is also, his life's mission is to encourage young people, so please write to him. But Erdos is constantly traveling around the world.
Exactly.
So the best thing they told me was just write to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and they will forward the letter to Erdos.
Okay.
So this was, I think, around October of 1975. I wrote to the Hungarian Academy. And within a month, I got a response from Erdos saying, in November, that he's going to be in India in December at a conference of the Indian Statistical Institute, where he will be speaking for their centenary of Mahalanobis, the founder. And he asked me whether I would come to Calcutta to attend this conference, and then we can meet. So I responded saying, actually, my paper has been on this topic, is accepted in the student session presentation.
In the very conference?
In that same conference. But I can't go because of my half-yearly exams, and this was my final year of undergraduate. So there the matter ended, and I thought maybe I'm not able to meet him. My father was going to that same conference to give an hour lecture in the probability section.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my father, can you present my 15-minute talk? And I gave him, give him an idea of what the talk was about. He said, yes, I'll present, but I won't take any questions. So he presented my lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And Erdos made it a point to attend my father's presentation of my work in the student section, but did not attend my father's 1-hour lecture in the probability section. So he was interested in this. So at the end of the talk, he went up to my father and said, while I am very happy to meet you, I'll be much happier to meet your son. And so my father said, I'm sorry he's not able to come because of his exams. At which point Erdos said that he has the next few days free in Calcutta.
Yeah.
But he's on his way to Sydney to work with George Shekaras in Sydney. But he said that instead of spending the few extra days in Calcutta, he can come to Madras to meet me and spend those few extra days in Madras, which is a great gesture on the part of such a famous mathematician.
Certainly.
So what my father did was he was at that time the director of the Mathematics Institute. He arranged for some lectures for Erdos so that he could pay him an honorarium, because it's not nice to have such a distinguished person and not treat him properly.
Also, it is a really good idea
And a good idea to hear him, and also lectures that Ramanujan mentioned. So Erdos came to Madras. I attended both his talks, and we were walking along the Madras beach, and I told him about my work on this function AFN, and I said I calculated the average order, but I couldn't calculate the normal order.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the reason you're not able to calculate the normal order is because almost always this function behaves like the largest prime factor in size. The largest prime factor does not have a normal order because of all these De Bruyn's results. So then I said, well, if this almost always behaves like the largest prime factor because it dominates, if I subtract that, that should behave like the second largest prime factor. If I subtract that, it should behave like the third, and so on. So is this generally true, that if you go up all the way up to k minus 1 prime factors, it's dominated by the kth largest prime factor? It's a very nice question. Why don't you prove that theorem? And then he gave me some leads, some references. So for the next several months I worked on it and I proved the theorem. And I sent it to him, he checked the proof, it was correct. And then he made some improvements here and there of the estimates. That's how our first joint paper came. But by the time it was published, I was a graduate student at UCLA, and he actually wrote a letter for me to join UCLA and work with Ernst Strauss. And so the paper got published in the Pacific Journal of Mathematics. That was my first paper on this problem. Then we wrote another paper, not so much on AFN, but on large prime factors. That also got published in the Pacific Journal. So these were two substantial papers, and they are actually among my most quoted papers. In fact, among my very first papers, even today are among my most quoted papers. But since you are from the world of Q, I will add one thing. That, of course, there are lots and lots of people who have collaborated with Erdos, so I'm not unique. But what is unique is the fact that he came out of the way to see me in Madras.
That is definitely, yes.
But what I would like to tell you, and I think this will interest you, is that Erdos has encyclopedic knowledge of his field of elementary number theory, just as George Andrews has encyclopedic knowledge of partitions and Q hypergeometry. Anything you want to do in partitions, you ask Andrews and he will tell you where the reference is. If he doesn't know, then that means it's an unexplored territory.
In a sense, I might be exploiting that too. I always send him my questions.
Yes. It's really good. And so I consider myself very fortunate to have collaborated with both Erdos in the first half of my academic career when I was in elementary and analytic number theory, and with George Andrews in the second half of my career when I work in partitions and Q series. So let me just conclude this narrative with one analogy. Hardy said that he considered himself very fortunate to have collaborated in something like equal terms with both Ramanujan and Littlewood, that no other person can boast this. I won't say equal terms, but I consider myself very fortunate to have collaborated with both George Andrews and Paul Erdos, and probably I'm the only person to have done that. I'm not 100%.
That your interests are going back towards the analytic number theory nowadays, and I'm trying to keep you in the Q series side.
But that's actually forced by students who now want to write a thesis in analytic number theory, so I've sort of gotten back. for their benefit.
But let's go back to the Q series side and let's talk about maybe Ramanujan. So you said Erdos was really supportive of the young mathematicians, and this is also true for you when it comes to you, that you just mentioned that you are forced to go back to the analytics side by the students, and that's not the only thing that you do. There's also the SASTRA Ramanujan prize that I had the honor to join last year, not to take the prize, but yeah, so...
And you've come to Coca-Cola.
That is true, yeah.
So, I think one of the things that rubs off on you whenever you collaborate with great individuals is you imbibe, or at least try to imbibe some of their great qualities, right? So, as I said, Erdos has proved fantastically important theorems, but what sets him apart is the number of young people whom he has groomed and encouraged. So I also wanted to do something for young people. So, as I told you, the idea to launch the Ramanujan Journal came during the Ramanujan Centennial. But subsequently I got involved in organizing and helping Shastra University in Kumbakonam organize conferences. They moved into the Ramanujan whole world by purchasing Ramanujan's home, and they're maintaining it as a museum. But what happened was, during one conference at Shastra in 2004, it was actually the second conference that Shastra was conducting on Ramanujan, they asked me to inaugurate it. And I felt honored to do that. And just as I was ascending the stage along with the Vice Chancellor to inaugurate the conference, he whispered to me and said, "Professor, I want to set apart $10,000 every year for something in the name of Ramanujan. Why don't you just announce in your talk what that should be, and we'll do it." I was just taken aback. So I looked at him and I said, I'm stunned that you really are doing this, and I'm very happy that you're doing this, but you want me to announce it without consulting anyone? And he said, no, all these consultations and committees will take too long. You just tell me what you feel and we'll do it. So I had a few minutes to think about this, and so when I got up and spoke, I mentioned this very generous offer from the Vice Chancellor. So I said, why not create a prize, an annual prize in Ramanujan's name, but we'll make the upper bound for the age to be 32,
which is
not because it's a power of 2, but because 32 is the number of years that Ramanujan lived, and so it's a challenge to any individual. What can you do in that same time span? And I said, this way we will give a prize recognition of people ahead of the Fields Medal. And so this is something we can do, because putting a crown on somebody's head after the person has received the Fields Medal is easy. We got to recognize these people early. He liked the idea, and therefore this prize was launched the very next year. And then he turned towards me and said, I want you to be the chair of this prize committee. So that's how I got involved in the prize, and the support of the international community has been tremendous. People like Peter Sarnak, Benedict Gross, and others have made nominations. They have served on the prize committee, and without that help, there is no way in which we can select such stellar young candidates.
I was going to say, it feels like in the first 32 years, maybe the mathematicians might not be able to accomplish a lot, but the award winners are actually really, really well established, and the things that they have discovered are really substantial.
Absolutely, and they have continued to produce work of such quality. That's why subsequently they have got Cole Prize, the Fields Medal, and so on and so forth. Right? So this was actually mentioned. People cautioned me and said, "Isn't 32 too stringent upper bound?" But I said, "Listen, we got to do something different, and so let's go ahead." And we have been extremely lucky. But also, as Hardy said, mathematics is a young man's game, right? And therefore, most people do some of their best work very young. And so we've been able to get people like Bhargava and Soundararajan to start with. I think we have a picture of Bhargava and Soundararajan there. Akshay Venkatesh, so many young people who really rock the world. Peter Scholze. And I feel very happy not only to have encouraged young people, but also to have done something in the name of Ramanujan in India. See, I've left India and I'm settled here. So this is my way of contributing something to India's heritage also, because Shastra is located in Kumbakonam, in Ramanujan's town. So this gives me a lot of personal satisfaction.
And maybe that's a good point to mention that a Ramanujan prize already existed. There was a prize in the name of Ramanujan, but I don't think it was in India. And SASTRA Ramanujan prize, now more prestigious than that, is actually being awarded in India by this Shastra deemed university.
Correct. No, the other Ramanujan prize you're referring to is the ICTP Ramanujan prize.
So.
Yeah. It actually happened afterwards.
Oh, really?
Because what actually happened was that I got this email from the director of the International Center for Theoretical Physics, who was an Indian by that at that time, and he said he wanted to do something in the name of Ramanujan.
Oh.
So we'll come close very soon. So
yeah, sure.
But because ICTP stands for Encouragement of Science in the Third World, that Ramanujan prize is for mathematicians coming from the Third World. It so happens India is classified in the Third World because in the old days it was poverty and other things, but India is actually quite advanced. But India comes under the purview of the ICTP. So there is it's for all areas of mathematics, but focused on mathematicians coming from the Third World, and I think the age limit is 45. But whatever it is, it's a very good prize. They give it along with they work with the Abel Foundation, and they do it along there, but the scope is very different. So ours is the first recognition in the Shastra prize.
Yeah, the reference that I have, maybe it has changed already, is Wikipedia. It was saying that there are two Ramanujan prizes.
There are two.
And Shastra is much more prestigious than the other one.
Yeah.
One thing maybe before finishing I should mention is that I was expecting, I don't know why, for more Shastra Ramanujan prize winners to donate that award money to the university. But that's just me.
Okay, so let me give you
right?
an example. Since you mentioned the donation, I think one person who did it right away at that time, gave away the prize money to some good cause, was Roman Holowinsky. He actually took the prize money, and I think, I don't know the details, but he has donated the money for some cause for young students. So he has done that. So, but that I definitely know.
Yeah, this is not to say that they don't deserve the money or they don't deserve the award. It's just, in my opinion, the award means more than the monetary value.
Oh yeah, that I agree. Yeah, that I certainly agree.
But that was my personal opinion. Anyway, so thank you so much, Professor. Yeah.
Thank you for the second interview and the chance.
Maybe we will have a third one.